Hey everybody, welcome to the Alistair McCourt podcast. First of all, a belated happy 2023. I hope you had a great holiday season and you are well into your 2023, keeping up with the goals, the habits, and of course the New Year's resolutions, which that's exactly where I'm going to start, because the question is, are you still on track? Are you still keeping your New Year's resolutions? Do you still have your goals? I'm sure I'm not the only one, but according to the University of Scranton, a study they did, only 8% of Americans feel they're successful in keeping their resolutions by the end of the year. Yes, 8%. This isn't because we're all lazy or procrastinators, they say. It's because many of us are just too ambitious with our aspirations. So seeing that this was the very first episode of the new year, I thought I'd dive into a little bit more about New Year's resolutions and goals. And in one of the latest studies on Forbes Health, this was actually done in November 2022, so just 2 months ago from the recording of this podcast, the goals of the most popular goals were the improved mental health was 45% of the people, improved fitness 39%, weight loss 37%, improved diet 33%, and improved finances 30%. So very, very interesting stats there from Forbes Health. Also, in the same study, men are more confident, 86%, than women, 79%, in the ability to reach their goals. Maybe that's something to do with our ego, guys. 52% plan on using a resource such as an app, online platform, or membership for assistance to sticking to their resolutions. Men are more likely than women to rely on these sources, and apps are the most popular accountability tool. So some interesting stats coming from Forbes Health on New Year's resolutions. Now, staying on this topic of achieving goals and creating better habits, I thought there would be no better way to start the year by actually sharing a episode that I was on recently on my good friend's podcast, Ed Bowers, the Sports Career Podcast. And on this episode, we talked about the habits that make a champion, developing self-awareness, and ways you can invest in yourself in 2023. So, guys, thank you so much again for being patient with me. I wish you an incredible 2023. Remember, nothing happens unless you make it happen. So here we go. This is the Sports Career Podcast with Ed Bowers and myself. I hope you enjoy it.
Alistair, it's such a joy to have you back on the Sports Career Podcast. You're actually the first ever guest come 3 times. And they always say number 3 is that lucky number. But really, jokes aside, over the years, I'd say the hardest years with the COVID period, we've done many conversations, we've done many collaborative projects. And every time I get on the mic, I always know we're going to have an educational conversation. But before the listeners who didn't know who you are, please check out the other 2 podcasts and Alistair's podcast show too. But just literally 1 to 2 minutes, just a quick overview of who Alistair McCourt is, if they've never heard of you. If you wouldn't mind, Alistair.
Ed, it's always a pleasure to come on to your podcast. I always love listening to it, learn a lot from you as well. And massive respect for the consistency. I mean, I don't know how many podcasts you've done now. What, 2, 3?
300. Over 300 this year.
Wow. Okay. Well, I've got my own podcast, and I know how much work it is. But when I see how much preparation you put into each podcast and the research you do, well, that's what I call a real professional. And I'm nowhere near your level there. So I just wanted to put that out first before we go into it. But who am I? I'm still trying to figure out who I am. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. I am a leadership consultant. I don't like to use the word expert because I'm someone that's always learning, and I hope it is like that until the day I leave Earth. Is every day I wake up with a desire to learn, a desire to listen better as well. So yes, I'm a leadership consultant, speaker, author. Mentor as well. Once you get a little bit older, once you start to see a little bit of gray on the beard, then you become apparently a person of wisdom. Yes, that's basically what I do on a daily basis now. I work with large organizations. I work with athletes, CEOs, and actually anybody who wants to better themselves and seek excellence. Some of the clients I have range from housewives who just really want to be better at what they do, better wives, better mothers, all the way up until CEOs and world-class athletes. So that's what I do.
You're being too modest. Right here, I've got all your books. So the first one that I first ever got was Champion Minded. Any young athletes, I'd say you must read. The next one, if you want to be a coach, is The 7 Keys of Being a Great Coach. That doesn't mean being a sports coach, by the way. I've even used some of your methodology in helping students into the sports industry and simplifying it. The next one, which I think when we got really close with like our connections and working together, was Developing a Winning Attitude and Mindset. Then last year with Mark Clements, you did a great interview with him with Lead with Purpose and Make an Impact. Again, a great book for leadership, and I would say almost like self-leadership, then more than just learning about leadership. And then finally, which we'll definitely talk about today, which I'm absolutely adoring this, but mainly because of the size. Like, to be honest, when you see this, it's like in your hand, and it's Habits That Make a Champion, and it's like 50 5-minute micro chapters, which is great with an espresso, by the way. But we'll dig in this in a lot more detail. But I think you're quite modest, Alistair. Like, I appreciate the kind words of, what I've done on a podcast, which, it's just a real passion for me. But for you, I want to take the time to say thank you for taking the time to write all these books, because I know I'm writing my first book, how much time it takes, but also the discipline as well. And you haven't just done one. You've done 5 amazing, but I think I'm missing one more book, which I don't have. I think it's How to Be a Great Team Player, if I'm correct.
You are.
That's the one. But all I'm saying is,
yes.
I want to thank you. I think a lot of your fans who are listening to this, and I need to say this now, and putting our friendship aside, your consistency on social media is second to none. It really is. And I know in the past, I ping you the odd WhatsApp message going, great work. And I think at times we both forget to give us that pat on the back. So I just want to say thank you for your dedication of always serving. I call it like leadership with service. So Alistair, thank you. But to be honest, today I'm going to interrogate you in such a good way about your new book. So before we talk about your book, I always say this for special guests who come back. Out of interest, from when we last spoke, what is that one skill you've developed reflecting, looking back?
I think, each year I come up with 2 words for the year. And I know there's a lot of people that maybe might come up with 1 word, and that could be something like health, energy, whatever it can be. But definitely for me, self-awareness has been a massive one this year. And, what is self-awareness? Self-awareness is the ability to look within yourself, to understand your strengths, to understand your weaknesses. Self-awareness also involves an amount of vulnerability as well. It's also to be critical on yourself, but not to beat yourself up. So I think the more I've gone on this journey in life, I would say I beat myself up quite a bit in previous years about maybe goals not accomplished or failures I've had or mistakes I've made, which I still do today. But I don't beat myself up about it anymore. And I think that's been a result of self-reflection and self-awareness, of understanding myself more and understanding that I can't be brilliant in everything. I can't do everything perfectly. And that's why it's important to have, to outsource and have people around you, but to also be aware of your weaknesses. And it's fine. We all have weaknesses. So, Ed, I would say self-awareness has been a big one.
Just with regards to beating yourself up, my goodness, when you say that, it reminds me of the young tennis Ed Bowers. Whenever I lose a game or a set and I just can't move away and just focus on the next set. And I know in the past we've always talked about just focus on the next point. But when you mean beating yourself up, do you really mean that psychological aspect? Because I think we always hear it, but we don't dig deep of, is it because of the triggers that make you beat yourself up mentally? Or is it more you've done a mistake and you go, then you beat yourself up? I'm just curious, because for me, it's both, but I was wondering which one influencing the most.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to an element of perfection you can have, the standards you drive for yourself as well. all the high achievers and successful people I've worked with, they're very, very hard on themselves. So part of my job as a mentor or consultant was to try and, you know, help them through that process of not beating themselves up as much. You know, anybody that's world class in anything is very hard on themselves. They're very tough on themselves. You have to be, in a way, you have to have that self-discipline and those high standards, for example. And I can relate to you as well. I played junior tennis as well, and just couldn't control my emotions and couldn't get over mistakes. And this is something that I help tennis players and athletes with these days as well. So I think everybody deals with it, and I'm sure all the listeners right now will also relate to it as well. But it's understanding that you can't be perfect in everything, and every day is not going to be Super Bowl day and everything's going to go to plan. We've got to learn to understand what the controllables are, what the uncontrollables are, and accept that. You know, every day can't be great, but you can find something great in every day. And that's what I try and do. I try and focus on the small wins. Not, you know, you've heard this multiple times from me about the brick wall of confidence. Is we can either beat ourselves up about things and take bricks off the wall, so we're breaking down our wall of confidence, or we can choose, and that's a big word, choose to recognize the small wins, and each brick is a small win on that wall, which builds your wall of confidence. So that's the way I've chosen to try and see it, to try and work towards it. I'm nowhere near perfect yet. I still, you know, I play a game called pickleball now, which is almost like a game of mini tennis or paddle, for if you like. And you know, I was just playing this morning here at my club in Delray Beach, and I find myself berating myself after a miss. So even someone like myself who writes books on positivity and champion-minded, I'm not being necessarily champion-minded myself when I'm beating myself up. But but I think that gets back to your first question, which leads to self-awareness, where I'm aware that I'm doing it. So, you know, what's my next move? How am I going to better that, for example?
So with regards to like put it, you know me, I always go back to like implementation. That was your word of the year, like self-awareness. How did you implement it in? Was it the journaling? So I know gas was a big thing with use of gratitude. And that was an exercise you did every evening before going to bed. So I'm just curious of how you implemented that word. And by the way, my word this year was confidence, and next year, like 2023, it's energy, meaning not being hyper. It's more getting the best out of my body and mindset. Because I don't know about you, but I think even if you don't mind, I'd like to give behind the curtains of when we worked together. There's days we had WhatsApp calls where we were both down, just due to the pandemic, due to the pressures financially. It was a lot going on, and I realized I put pressure on my physical health and I wasn't mindful of it. I sort of took it for granted. So my word is actually energy next year, but it's more vitality more than anything else. So, but going back to my question of the self-awareness, how do you implement it? I'm just curious in that side of things.
Yeah, and getting back to what you said there, gas, what does that stand for? Gratitude, which I practice in the morning and throughout the day. Appreciation for people, appreciation for just general things throughout the day, the person that helped you at the post office, recognizing those things. And then the S was, here's the big one, self-reflection. So better self-awareness comes from self-reflection. When you self-reflect on your day, for example, what did I do well today? What could I have done better today? Who did I make better today? We become more self-aware of ourselves. So, you know, I like to ride my bike to the pickleball and back. That's a good way for me to think. I'm not sitting in the car. Luckily, the weather's good enough to do that as well. But I will self-reflect on the way home on the bike about about how I was on the court and how I was with people and conversations and so on and so forth, which gives me a better understanding of where I can improve and what I would do different this time. So let me let you into something that's really been over the last 2 days, and I think I sent you an email yesterday about it as well, of good emotional intelligence, of remembering people's names. So my self-reflection riding home today on the bike was, how did I do with people's names? Because every time I go there, I meet new people. that have come to play. And it's one of my goals as well, is to remember names better, because everybody loves the sound of their name. And admit it, when you meet somebody again for the second time and they go, "Hey Ed," but you can't remember their name, and you're like, "Oh my gosh." And that happens to me a lot, where they go, "Hey Alistair," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what's her name, or what's his name again?" But I'm super impressed that you remembered my name, but I can't remember your name, so those small little things leave a massive impression. So I self-reflected on that. So my self-awareness became of, okay, I've got to remember people's names better, because it leaves an impression.
I love that. And by the way, what I do, and I know the same feeling, I have to write it down now. Whenever I hear a new name, I need to write it down. Don't know if you're into a guy called Jim Quick. I sort of did his speed reading course, gosh, years ago. And he said with names, associate it to an item or associate it to something. So you could say Harry or relate to Harry Potter with a scar. It was little things like that. Not saying that person had a scar, that guy Harry. I'm just saying use that with triggers. And so I hope that helps you, mate, with regards to remembering names, because that's what I do. As you know, with interviewing so many people, it can be like when you're like seeing them in person, because actually quickly I said this was the first year I actually saw a lot of my special guests in person, and it was such a cool feeling. So yeah, but I love that with gas. Carry on.
One of the ways that I so it's good, because you always say, okay, well, that's good, but what is your strategy? What is your techniques now moving forward? Okay, so you've recognized this thing that you're maybe not as competent in. What's your plan going to be? So mine was, so if I meet someone, for example, today to play pickleball, and his name is Mike, what I'll try and do is during the play, during the game, I'll go, "Good shot, Mike," or "Pass the ball, please, Mike." And I'll say it as much as I can, and then it becomes ingrained. So I think one of the best things you can do is, when you meet somebody, is in that meeting and in that time, try say their name as much as possible. I mean, don't completely overdo it, but by the third time, fourth time, it'll probably be ingrained, or they'll correct you and go, "Sorry, it wasn't Mike, it was Mick." And then you'll know, so that next time, "Oh gosh, what was his name again?" So that was one of my strategies today, is say as much as possible while you're with the person.
Awesome. See, I told you, everybody, when you listen to these conversations, magic happens, and we haven't really started. I'm going to put you on the spot now, because you've done quite a lot of books with regards to sort of, I call it your brand, this champion minded. And I've learned with all your books now, it's not about sport. So I'm just curious, what is your definition of being a champion?
I wrote it in the book in the first paragraph, and now it's very, very simple. It's a champion is committed to their vision, excellence, and maximizing everything they've got. So it really comes down to that, is that you don't necessarily have to be the most talented, the most skilled, the smartest, all those things. It really comes down to attitude, effort, and striving for excellence. My mentor, my great mentor, who just unfortunately passed away last week, and maybe we'll get into him in this conversation as well. Nick Bollettieri described a champion like this. He said, "A champion is able to pursue their dreams and become the best they can be." So, some people think that a champion is that person standing on the top of the podium with the gold medal or the trophy, for example. But a champion is someone that's giving their all, trying their best, and pursuing excellence.
And we'll definitely talk about Nick. Like, really quickly, guys, I played tennis at the age of 7 to 22, and at such a young age, I was trying to learn as much as I could from Nick across the pond, like his influence in coaching. And we'll touch on that, because I know you've had many engagements with him, which this is so true what I'm about to say. Muhammad Ali's one, Nick is another. If I had the opportunity to do a podcast with, they're on that sort of dream board. And I want this podcast to acknowledge him, because I think in the tennis world, the amount of consistency he had, not with just great players, but I'm curious on this, of the great people he's influenced through his different academies experience, must be in the thousands. And I think that's probably where he's a greater man than the world champions he's created on the court. Would you mind just sharing your thoughts on that before moving on?
I mean, what an incredible man. I mean, where do I start? I met him back in 2007. I'll remember the first meeting. We were walking into, the Bollettieri tennis when it was still the Bollettieri Tennis Academy before IMG took over, and there he was waiting for us, big white teeth, the smile. He hugged us as well. Now we never met him before, but just you could feel the warmth and the excitement and the energy, and like who were we, or who am I? And you're meeting the great Nick Bollettieri, but that struck me. What struck me was when I spent time with Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski at Duke University. I was struck by the similarities between two great leaders there, because they make you feel special. They make you feel like somebody. As where a lot of famous people, a lot of these people that you can be starstruck by, um, uh, don't make you feel that way. They make you feel inferior. And Nick and Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski, made me feel special. Uh, Another commonality is that they ask you a lot of questions instead of you ask. You're thinking, why they? I want to ask you questions. They're curious about you, so they're more interested in you than trying to be interesting. So that was something that struck me. But I mean, wow, I was able to spend so many amazing um, times with Nick as well, be it in the coaching box when we had a player playing, or on the practice court, over lunch at his favorite restaurant just near the academy, the South Philly cheesesteaks. Um, just he just I never saw him once be rude to somebody or not have time for somebody or a photograph for somebody. Just an incredible man. I mean, what a man with a vision. You know, IMG Bollettieri, which is now I don't know how many acres big. It's massive. It's like a city. Started on a tomato field. That was his vision, to put tennis courts on there. So, and look what it became. People said he was crazy, and yeah, he was crazy. But his definition of crazy is that sane people will do, successful people will do things that are achievable. Crazy people do things that others think are unachievable. So that's just the mindset and the approach he had.
I do not use this word lightly, but I think he is in the tennis world. The legacy he's left. Do you think it's going to be bigger than him not being here now? Because for me, I'm reading more of his content. I now am going back and reading old pieces of content with him and Andre Agassi. And, you've got to realize era of tennis has changed and developed. Just put things in perspective. If you have never heard of Nick Bollettieri, he had Jim Courier. Gosh, that's a name from the past. And then the Williams sisters, Venus and Serena, like it's that consistency we talk about all the time. And it's same in your book, to have a coach who's that consistent, not just 1 or 2 decades. I'm talking maybe 5 decades. I'm just curious on your that side of things.
Yeah. What's phenomenal about him? Okay, so he had at least 10 number ones, world number ones. Boris Becker, Andre Agassi, the Williams sisters, Mary Pierce, Sharapova, gosh, and then multiple Grand Slam champions. But his ability to adapt to different players, and like you said, they're now in different eras. So he was coaching for 60 years and he was still relevant. Now, there's a big word there as well as relevant. Is he was able to move with the times. He was able to stay in front of the times. He was on Twitter. He was on Instagram, even when he was in his 80s. I listened to the other night a speech by him when he was 87, live on stage to 5,000 people. I mean, the guy was on fire. I mean, 87-year-old. He was just an absolute icon for me. I aspire to be like half of what he has been. Just his courage. A lot of people, like I mentioned, said he was crazy, but I've never met a successful person that isn't slightly crazy, because you have to do things that others aren't willing to do. You have to be willing to go to places that other people don't want to go. You have to be willing to be mocked, to be teased, to be people are going to be jealous of you. The higher you climb the ladder, the more snakes there's going to be. So just incredible man. He will be missed, and he touched, like you said, there Ed, thousands upon thousands.
And it goes so well with this podcast topic, and I really mean that. And I said that's why I had to reach out to do this. In this, everybody, we do not have time to go through all of Alistair's book and do 50, but he's kindly given me, can we go through 5? And these are like 5 core chapters of the book, but I highly recommend reading the other 45 chapters. But we're going to dig into 5. And I think, well, Nick, we're talking about him. It's actually part of this chapter. You mentioned it already with regards to positive energy, right attitude. But the first habit I want to talk about is the habit of bringing a right attitude. Like, putting Nick aside a little bit, how big is this in any walks of life, but having the right attitude? And actually, finally, Alistair, this has been one thing you've taught me. It took years, it sounds crazy, of how to control your attitude, because it's easy said than done. So could you just share like what you meant of bringing the right attitude with regards to this chapter?
Yeah, every day we're challenged with different things, and we're all going through different things in our lives, challenges. It could be financial, it could be relationships, it could be mental health, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we get to choose our attitude. We get to choose how we're going to live our life or live our day one day at a time. And it's a blessing to be given a day at a time. Every morning I wake up, as cliche as it may sound, I thank God for another day. And it doesn't matter who your higher power is, but be thankful for another day, that we have another opportunity to make an impact on others and improve ourselves. But it's the right attitude is a mindset. If I think about, I'll give you a great story, and I just read it the other day. The Mercedes Formula One team, their leader is Toto Wolff. And when he took over Mercedes, when he was going for the interview to be handed over the Mercedes Formula One team, the Petronas team, he went into the office, and you talk about standards and so on and so forth. And he said, in the reception area, there was an old newspaper on the coffee table. There was an old coffee cup still there. It was dirty. And he was sitting there thinking, well, this doesn't look like a Formula One environment. Okay, so there he was with standards already. Anyway, in the meeting later, he was talking to some of the technicians and engineers and people high up, and they said, a big issue with us, or the challenge is a technical issue. And he said, no, it's not. It's an attitude issue. He said the attitude needs to change here and everything before everything else changes. And that's a pretty direct comment to make, but it's spot on. Is that everything begins with attitude, of how coachable you are, to how well you accept feedback, how you approach difficult situations, conversations, adversity, resilience. All these things all comes down to the attitude we choose. It's little wonder that the best athletes in the world, like the Roger Federers, the Tom Bradys, are able to control emotions and have the right attitude 99% of the time. So it's a key thing. And like I said, it's not easy to be positive all the time. I'm not positive all the time. But the difference between positive and negative people is that positive people are able to recognize those negative thoughts and move on quicker. So that is the difference between a positive and negative person.
Also, Alistair, like again, I want to weave in from our working relationship. Another part is just showing up. Like, I remember we had calls. We did a collaborative project. One of my favorite one was your mental toughness conversation we done, and we had to get it done. And can you remember the third day you had the gardeners going off in the background? You were going nuts. I said, look, and you said, hey, can we do this tomorrow? I said, absolutely. But at the time, it didn't affect my attitude. I went, no worries, we'll do the next day. I know these sound silly examples, but it's actually these examples where we could have just recorded it, give it to you guys, and it would have been a bad experience. And again, I did enjoy that, but I also did enjoy you getting frustrated over that gardener. But hey, going to the next chapter, because I'm trying to get this in an order where it can set people up with regards to being this more champion individual. The next one is the habit of taking ownership of the journey. So we've talked about attitude. Now the keyword's ownership. Like, in this chapter, just give a little reflection of what you mean here from a big picture perspective.
Yeah, I think there's two words that, that when it comes to ownership, two words that stick out are accountability and responsibility. Is that I am responsible for what happens. It's all on me with regards to the choices I make, the habits I build, the behaviors I have, the actions, the thoughts, etc., etc. That's all on me. So, in a team environment, making a mistake We're all going to make mistakes. What do we do? Do we try cover it up, or do we own on to it? Own up to it, for example. That is taking ownership of that mistake, or taking ownership of failing in certain things, for example. So, ownership is, Casey Stoney, the former Manchester United women's head coach, and now she's at San Diego Waves, which she's just a fantastic leader, a fantastic coach. She says that ownership is a mentality, which is 100% on the money right there, is that we take ownership for our losses, our defeats, our wins, all these type of things. So, it takes courage to do that, especially in a team environment. If you make a mistake, you mess up, but you take ownership for it and you own up to it, and see how you can move on and improve on that moving forward. But it really is the essence, I believe, of success, of excellence, is taking ownership of the journey, of your journey, not blaming others, not complaining, but stepping up and being responsible and taking accountability.
Just from a practical standpoint, again, you know me, I always like, what's the how? For me, I have to do values that I live by, and then I act on them. So, the trust, honesty, the biggest one, integrity. Is that what you mean of ownership? So it's all well saying take ownership of your journey, take responsibility. But if you write down your values and live by them, would you say that's the first step? I just want to make sure the listeners can put it into a practical standpoint.
Yeah, when you have values, it helps you make the right choices and the right decisions instead of the easy ones. So if you don't have values or standards to live by, it's very easy to slip into poor behaviors or poor decisions, poor choices, for example. So when you have values, it helps you make clearer decisions and choices instead of easier ones, for example. So yeah, it definitely would relate to that.
Cool. So again, I'm painting a picture for the listeners. We've talked about attitude, then ownership. The next one is the habit of getting uncomfortable. So I think we all like that comfy chair. We all like the warm bed instead of getting up half an hour earlier. To put that into practical use. In this chapter, what do you mean of getting uncomfortable in this part of the book?
Where I'd go there first is conversations. Is that, be it in business, be it in teams, be it in relationships, is that no healthy culture or healthy relationships happen without difficult conversations, uncomfortable conversations. So I'd start there, because it's one of the hardest things for people is to have difficult or hard conversations. I know consulting with leaders, that is one of the areas where I help them most, is on how to have those conversations and how to have those uncomfortable confrontations, so to say. But getting out of your comfort zone is the key to making things happen. I just said there now is that successful people do things that others don't like to do, don't feel like doing. Do you feel like getting out of bed at 4:30 in the morning to go to the swimming pool to do 1,000 laps? No, not everybody feels like that. You'd rather stay in bed. But these are the choices and decisions you make as an athlete, for example. Or writing a book, or starting your own business, for example, is that you're still sitting at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, where you'd maybe rather be watching Netflix or be sleeping, for example. Choices and decisions you make. So, they always like to say, Ed, that success happens away from the crowds and the cameras and the lights, and that is true, is that you don't see, the 95% that's going on away from the public eye, for example. Those are what we talk about being uncomfortable, getting uncomfortable. I can remember spending so many Christmases, birthdays, missing friends' weddings, all these things because of either being on a professional athlete, or in my career, furthering my career as a coach on the professional tour. Those were choices I made, and they were uncomfortable. There weren't sacrifices. I don't believe in that word. I believe that we make choices. Nobody was forcing me to do it. I chose to do it. And, when I hear an athlete saying, "Oh, I've sacrificed this and that," and I said, "Well, no, you haven't sacrificed it. Nobody forced you. It's your choice if you want to do that or not. It was my choice to miss Christmases and birthdays and so on and so forth." So yeah, there's many areas we could go to in terms of getting uncomfortable. But I believe, and you probably read this in the introduction of the book, Habits That Make a Champion, is you belong to the 5% club of someone who wants to improve yourself and pursue excellence, because 95% aren't willing to do the things that that require success.
Just on that point, the one I want to just touch on a bit more, like peeling that onion of the uncomfortable conversations. We've had this in the past. Like, how does it build trust when you do acknowledge, let's say, the big elephant in the room, and then, you know, you've had that awkwardness, but actually it creates growth? I'm just curious on, that's the benefits when you have those uncomfortable conversations, if you have it with an open mindset, both parties, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You know, just before I came onto this call, I was chatting to a client that I mentor and talking about the word trust. And I'll show you where you're going with this if I can remember it. I actually wrote about it in Lead with Purpose. So I'm glad you have the book on hand there. But trust. So let's look at that word trust. The T stands for trust takes time. All right. So it takes time. It takes building those relationships over time. The R stands for relationships. So building the relationship, the connection. Okay. The U stands for understanding others, which is important. Empathy, compassion. The S stands for sharing accolades. Okay. Showing appreciation, pointing out the positives, sharing the successes. And the T is, and this is where we're going for here, is truthfulness. There we go. It had to do with honesty. I know that. So how we build up that trust, Ed, is through truthfulness, through honesty, and over time. So time, relationships, understanding, sharing the accolades, appreciation, and truthfulness. That is how we build trust. And you know, no great things can happen without an element of trust. I think I just put out a tweet today as well, which is appropriate to this conversation. Is you know, they won't buy into your vision or your message if they don't trust in you first. So, you know, to get a buy-in, you need a trust in.
Yeah, 100%. Next chapter. See, I'm trying to create this flow, this energy. I hope you're enjoying this conversation.
You're doing great. You see, I don't have this skill that you have on a podcast where you can make it flow and stuff like that. If you listen to my podcast, I'm like all over the place.
Your podcasts are great. I do listen to them. Look, next one now. The habit of competing when the chips are down. I have to say, I've read a lot of books on habit. This one jumped. There's two. The next one jumped out at me, but this one jumped out of me because I think it's a great habit of how we cope with it. So what did you mean in this chapter of, again, I'll say again, the habit of competing when the chips are down?
You know, we all visualize this way of being a winner and being successful and achieving excellence. But the reality is there's going to be a lot of obstacles. There's going to be a lot of messiness. There's going to be a lot of mistakes and so on and so forth. You know, I describe it like a bowl of spaghetti. Is that when you're in that mess, it's just like you're in a bowl of sticky spaghetti. Like there's just, you know, you can't make it out. It's all over the place. So, you know, the reality of mastering a craft or becoming successful in anything is going to incur a lot of messiness, a lot of frustration. I think as I said, another word for messiness is frustration, is that you can't figure it out, or why am I not breaking through, or why am I not getting more followers on social media, for example. And we know that in the business world, followers means business. It means income, for example. So, you know, all these things that we're frustrated why we're not making that breakthrough. But and here's the point I like to make in that chapter is that you are actually making the breakthrough, but you have to go through that process first. You have to go through multiple messiness and situation, multiple bowls of spaghetti, if you like, to get to where you want to be. And I still am, because I'm still pursuing excellence. So I'm still eating my bowls of spaghetti every day at lunch, trying to figure out how I'm going to move to that next step and that next step. So yes, embrace the messiness, embrace the frustration. When you're stuck, when you're feeling you're not getting anywhere, understand you are in the process. You are making steps right now while you're in that mess, while you're in that area of, oh, I'm just not getting anywhere. I'm just not figuring it out. You actually are figuring it out. You're working through it. And listen, if it was so easy, would it be worth it? No.
Mm-hmm. But just on that point of the messiness, I love bowl of spaghetti metaphor, but from a practical standpoint, you know me, I like to give people some sort of tools. Does that mean at times we have to adjust and focus on progression? And we've said it beforehand, not being perfect, because again, I'm going back to when we work, there were times over COVID, it was messiness, but we figured it out. We had to adapt doing stuff purely all online, which I think we now really take for granted. But just from a practical standpoint of overcoming the messiness, does that mean we've just had that mindset of, again, having the great attitude, taking ownership, being uncomfortable, but also focus on progression, then perfection? I'd love your thoughts on that side of things.
Yeah. All those things you mentioned there, yes, it helps to keep an open mind, because you might be working hard, but not working smart. I think that could be one as well. So keeping an open mind, being a better listener, having a good network of people that can offer you outside advice, so you could be just stuck on your own thoughts, being closed-minded. What's that old saying, is trying to put into a square peg or something? What's that?
Putting a round hole in a round peg, like, yeah.
A square into a round. Yeah, something like that.
Yes,
Look,
like that. Yeah,
not
me.
You guys know what
we all know what you're talking about. But I do too.
Yeah.
It's thinking outside the box. That's the key.
Yeah, there's also that really cool meme or that picture of those cavemen pushing a cart with square wheels on it. And then here comes this other caveman with a wheel, proper round wheel, and saying, "Hey, try this." And they're like, "No, it's okay, thanks, we're good." So you're trying to pull this cart with square wheels, but you're not listening to advice of somebody saying, "Hey, here's a round wheel, try this." No, it's good. So you're working hard instead of smart. So yeah, progress, not perfection. Yes. In the book, I said, don't be so stuck. When you're stuck on perfection and an A+ mindset all the time, sometimes a B+ is good enough. And we can't be an A+ in everything. It's not possible. No one in the world is.
But the key is that consistency. Keep showing up again, like your your books,
just like your podcast.
It's anything, but no. But I want listeners to think, actually, it's not just about you writing books or me producing podcasts. It's your daily lifestyle. Like, I'll be honest, everybody, it's 9:30 on a Friday evening. What would I prefer to do? I did an Instagram post. I'd rather rock the mic, but I know a lot of people want to chill out and go out in town, or they just chill watching Netflix. It goes down to what you said. It's a choice.
And sorry, one more thing, Ed, and a lot of people think certain people are lucky, and yes, luck does happen. But some people say, "Oh, well, he's lucky. He has this or that," or "She's lucky. But they don't see this. You are at 9:30 at night on a Friday night. Hey, 95% would rather be watching Netflix or being out or with friends and so on and so forth. But there you are. So we all see the finished product of this podcast. They see the finished product, but they don't actually see what went on behind it. 9:30 at night. There you are. That was a choice of yours, for example. I say this about luck, and it's in the book as well. And I apologize if I keep saying, go to this in the book. Luck is like excellence. It comes from preparation plus opportunity plus action equals luck or excellence. I'll say that again. Preparation, putting in the preparation before the opportunity comes. Because when the opportunity comes, you're ready to take action because you're prepared. Creates luck, creates excellence. I don't know if that made sense, but
it does. And I think, trust me, I'm not here to get a badge of honor, and you don't like a badge of honor either. But I always do remind each other of those small wins. Like your book, you said to me the last call, Ed, getting it in December was really important to me. And it's a game changer. And I know you're always disciplined to make it happen. So I'm giving you behind the scenes. You didn't know I was going to say this, but this is where I'm acknowledging Alistair because of that discipline and resilience of getting the job done. But the final chapter, because I think this will help really paint the picture now. So really quickly, we've done attitude, ownership, uncomfortable, chips and messiness. But the final one is like the habit of focusing on the details. And this is a quote I want to share because honestly, when I read it, and I do read it like quite often as a reminder, excellence is in the details. Pay attention to every element and excellence will come. Like I want to end on this chapter, because if like the habit of the details, but how it can lead to excellence. Could you just overview this chapter? And for me, I think it's a game changer, but I would love you to share your thoughts of how important is this element of focusing on the details too.
This is a great place to end because we can sometimes overthink the details. So I think this is what experience teaches you, is the older and wiser you get and grayer, like there's a little bit of gray on my chin now, is that you start to figure out what's worth your energy, and there's your keyword for next year, and what's not worth your energy in terms of time when it comes to details. We all know the saying, don't sweat the small stuff. That's untrue. The small details is which makes excellence happen. It's usually the bigger stuff that we all like doing, but it's the small things on a daily basis that people find difficult to do. So that would be one thing, is excellence in the details, but also I want to add this is keeping things simple. And getting back to the great Nick Bollettieri, this was one of the things why he was one of the best coaches in the world. And he was the best coach I ever spent time with. And I've spent time with, I don't know how many coaches, world-class coaches in the world, was his ability to make the complex simple, was his ability to bring a message across in a very simple way that the athlete would understand. And that's why he had the ability to work with so many different personalities and cultures. And you think about all the athletes he's worked with, they're all different in every single way, but he was able to tap into them. He was able to understand them better. He was able to keep things simple. So I think it comes down to, yes, details are important, but knowing which details are important to spend time on and keeping things simple. We sometimes overthink things far too much.
Absolutely. So there you go, everybody. There are the 5. But Alistair, would you mind just sharing like the purpose of this book, your vision behind it, and yeah, the mic's yours, my friend. I'm absolutely loving it. And would you mind just sharing, what this book is all about, which is the habits that make a champion?
Yeah, simple, short messages. As you mentioned, there are 50 chapters, 5-minute reads. It's on audiobook as well, but it really comes down to maximizing everything that you've got. As the question you asked there, what is a champion? Define a champion. It's maximizing everything you've got, doing the best that you can, the best of your ability. Purpose of the book really comes down to my purpose myself, is to impact as many people as possible, to help them realize their purpose, to help them achieve the best they can achieve. So it's as simple as that, I'd say.
Absolutely. Look, I really do hope the listeners have enjoyed this conversation. As always, I do, and I never take them for granted. They're always a joy, everyone we do. But as always, Alistair, you know me, I always finish with an inspirational question. And because this keyword's habit, I thought it would be this. What 3 tips would you give to the listener so they can put habits into practice? Because words are words, but actions make things happen. So what 3 tips would you give to the listener implementing these habits into actual practice?
Oh, that's a tough one to think offhand. So I would say know what you want. So have clarity on what you want. Number 1, what is it you want? Number 2, know what you need to do in order to achieve it. So what resources do you need, for example? What type of environment, what people do you need that are going to help you towards this particular habit or this particular goal? And then number 3 is why does it mean so much to you to change this habit or to achieve this goal, for example? So it's important, first of all, to have clarity. You'd be amazed, Ed, how many people don't have total clarity on what they want, for example, as well. But that know what you need to do. But number 3, the reason why, the purpose, because just like New Year's resolutions fade away, and this will be a good time to bring this out as well, is that motivation fades away, but your purpose lasts. So on those days where it's difficult to get up, or spending at 10 o'clock at night doing a podcast, for example, your purpose of the reason why you're doing this will far override your motivation, because motivation can fade off. So yeah, that would be definitely the key thing, is really know what you want. And then, just start small, 1 habit at a time. Don't try and change 10 things, here's my goals for the new year and I want to do these 10 things. No, start with 1. Make it a habit, make it consistent, I believe in the 99 theory as well. It takes 90 days to build a habit, and it takes 9 days to lose. So, stick to it for 90 days at least, and you'll find that it'll start become part of your system.
I'm going to give another case study, which one you taught me, your sticky notes. Now, I don't know how many sticky notes you went in 90 days, but with regards to implementing gratitude, you would have a sticky note near your bed, and that was the first thought you had. See, look, I'm always learning from you, my man, and remembering too. So there's just an example, using a sticky note into practice of whatever habit you want to implement. So look, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation, but out of interest, Alistair, where can people interact with you, and where can people grab a copy of the new book?
Yeah, thanks, Ed. This has really been a cool conversation as always. So thanks for having me on. Book is available on Amazon worldwide. That would be the best place. I'm on Twitter, active on Twitter, as you know, at Alistair McCourt, and I'm on Instagram, Be Champion Minded. So those are probably the three best areas to connect with me. And of course, my podcast as well, the Alistair McCourt podcast. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one. Also, a massive thanks to Ed for letting me share the episode. Until next time, keep making an impact.